In the heart of Philadelphia, only a few hours' drive from the White House, there is a neighborhood many now call the capital of fentanyl. It is not a scene from a horror film. It is reality. In broad daylight, men and women stand frozen on the sidewalks, like statues, their eyes glazed, their bodies stiff, like mannequins forgotten on the streets. Others sit slumped against walls, their heads hanging low as traffic passes by, without a glance, as if these people had turned invisible. Some sway in slow motion, their bodies trapped between waking and collapse, caught in a twilight state that feels both human and inhuman at once. What transformed this once lively community into a place where time feels suspended? Why does a single neighborhood matter so much to the entire nation? And perhaps the hardest question of all, could this happen where you live? Could your own familiar streets one day look like this, filled not with life but with shadows of people who once had futures? Sources like NPR, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and reports from the Philadelphia Department of Public Health confirm that Kensington has become the epicenter of America's fentanyl crisis. But behind the headlines, the deeper story is not just about drugs. It is about poverty, neglect, and the quiet unraveling of the American dream. It is about a system that turned its eyes away for too long until the collapse became too obvious to ignore. Before we continue, let me ask you something. When you picture your own childhood street, what comes to mind? Was it filled with neighbors you knew by name, laughter in the evenings, or the smell of someone cooking dinner? Imagine walking that same street years later and seeing only silence, despair, and people too weak to move. That is the contrast you will find here, a before and after so brutal. It feels like a wound carved into the American landscape. Kensington, a community left behind. Kensington Avenue does not need a welcome sign. Everyone in Philadelphia knows what it represents. For decades, this neighborhood was home to working families, small shops, and the rhythm of industrial America. Factories buzzed, corner stores thrived, and the sidewalks carried the footsteps of children walking to school. But today, it is known nationwide for something else. On its sidewalks, groups gather in plain sight. Some remain completely motionless, others shuffle slowly as if gravity itself weighs them down. Syringes and discarded wrappers lie scattered between their feet. It does not happen behind closed doors. It happens right where school buses pass, where residents walk, where commuters wait for trains. It is no longer hidden in alleys. It is center stage, visible to anyone who dares to look. The most striking thing is the reaction or lack of it. Local police walk by without stopping. Residents carry groceries without turning their heads. Children clutch backpacks, learning to step around unconscious bodies as naturally as they would step around puddles after rain. For a visitor, the sense of normalcy in the middle of such devastation is almost impossible to comprehend. It feels like walking through two worlds layered on top of each other, one of routine and one of collapse. This is not only a street corner, it is a mirror reflecting a public health crisis. Kensington's struggles are not caused by drugs alone. Years of economic decline hollowed out jobs. Rents climbed while wages stagnated. Social and medical support failed to keep pace. The result is a place where desperation fills the spaces that opportunity once held, where dreams slowly rot into survival instincts. The Philadelphia Inquirer and The Guardian have both documented how these pressures converged, leaving Kensington particularly vulnerable. Once a strong community, it is now left navigating a reality many outsiders would not believe without seeing it with their own eyes. And when outsiders do come, they often leave in silence, unable to describe what they just witnessed. But let me pause here and ask you, if your hometown lost its factories, its affordable housing, and its support systems, how would your neighbors cope? Would the same neglect create the same cracks? And more importantly, if those cracks opened wide enough, would anyone step in to stop the collapse? Or would everyone simply keep walking, eyes averted, pretending it was not happening? Fentanyl and xylazine, the lethal combination. At the center of Kensington's crisis is not one single drug, but a mixture so destructive that it is changing the landscape of addiction in America. Fentanyl, a synthetic opioid, is estimated to be more than 50 times stronger than heroin. It is cheap to make, easy to transport, and deadly in even tiny amounts. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention warns that fentanyl has become the leading driver of overdose deaths nationwide. Dealers mix it into nearly everything from counterfeit pills to powders because it boosts profit even though it kills. Then came Xylazine, commonly called tranq. Originally a veterinary sedative, it is not approved for human use. Yet in Kensington, it is blended into street drugs, often without the user's knowledge. The effect is devastating. It sedates people so deeply that they appear frozen with open wounds on their skin that struggle to heal. The result has been described by outreach workers as walking corpses, though these are not corpses at all. They are living people caught in the grip of something stronger than chains. Together, fentanyl and xylazine create a mixture that devastates the body and the community at terrifying speed. The National Institute on Drug Abuse notes that users often do not even realize they are taking it until they are already dependent. By then, it is almost impossible to reverse the damage. What begins as a quick escape becomes a prison without walls. Walking down Kensington Avenue, the evidence is visible everywhere. Bodies bent at strange angles, people falling asleep mid-step, open sores left untreated. For residents, this is daily life. For newcomers, it is almost too much to process. The word unreal is whispered by many visitors, yet for Kensington, this is as real as it gets. The sidewalks are both stage and audience, displaying suffering that repeats day after day. And here is something for you to consider. If you are in pain, if you lost your job, your home, or your family, and someone offered a cheap escape that seemed to make the hurt go away for just a few hours, would you take it? What if you did not know what was really inside? And even more haunting, would you realize you were already trapped before it was too late? Or would you only recognize the prison once the door slammed shut and the key was gone? The human stories behind the numbers statistics can be overwhelming. Tens of thousands of overdose deaths every year across the United States. But behind each number is a person who once had dreams, families, and futures. In Kensington, many of those struggling today were not always on the streets. Some were once construction workers injured on the job. Others were students who experimented just once. Veterans who returned home with injuries or trauma. Parents who first took prescribed painkillers after surgery. Each of them carried stories, laughter, ambitions before life tilted into tragedy. NPR has shared interviews from people here that reveal a hard truth. One woman said plainly, "I do not use this to have fun. I use it just to get up in the morning, to feel normal to eat." Her words remind us this crisis is not about reckless indulgence. For many, it is about survival, about keeping the body moving just enough to face another day. Drop-in centers in the area provide temporary relief. Inside, people can eat a hot meal, take a shower, or change into clean clothes. For a few hours, dignity is restored. As one woman put it, "This place makes me feel safe. Every morning I wait for the doors to open, yet that safety is fragile." When the centers close, many return to the streets exposed to violence, to overdose, and to the constant pull of dependence. Even those in recovery often admit that one small decision could bring them back to Kensington overnight. That is how thin the line is between recovery and relapse. It is not a cliff, but a slippery slope. Let me turn the question to you. Have you ever been through a moment where one small decision, good or bad, completely changed your path? What if the only choices you had were between pain and a dangerous escape? And would you have had the strength to choose differently? Or would you, like so many here, simply choose what numbs the suffering fastest? When the American dream begins to crack. On May 12th of the year, 2025, the Philadelphia Department of Public Health released a stark report. In the first 4 months alone, more than 500 people had died from overdoses in the city. The majority of those deaths were concentrated right here in Kensington. This number is not just data. It is a warning about how fragile life is in a community caught in crisis. Each number could be a neighbor, a coworker, a classmate. Each number was once a life with birthdays, phone numbers, and favorite songs. Consider the geography. Only a short distance away, downtown Philadelphia shines with clean streets, government buildings, museums, and cafes filled with students. But travel a few blocks north, and you enter Kensington, a world that feels parallel but disconnected. The contrast could not be sharper. On one side, prosperity and ambition. On the other, despair and paralysis. It is as if the American dream itself splits apart along these streets. One half gleams, the other decays. This did not happen overnight. Decades of industrial decline stripped away jobs. Housing prices climbed faster than wages. Social safety nets weakened. As Pew Charitable Trusts has reported, these structural pressures built cracks in the system long before fentanyl arrived. And when fentanyl did arrive, it slipped directly into those cracks and widened them until the whole foundation began to shake. Now those cracks are wide open. Kensington has become both a symbol and a warning. If one of America's wealthiest cities can allow this to exist in its heart, what does that say about the nation as a whole? Is the dream itself still alive, or is it slowly fading into a myth? And so I ask you, when you think about the American dream, hard work stability, a home of your own, do you believe it is still real today? Or do you see, like Kensington shows us, that the dream may already be breaking apart? Trapped souls. Yad, right in the middle of the city's rushing footsteps, there is a corner where time feels frozen. A woman leans against a crumbling wall, her tangled hair falling over a hollow face. Her coat is too big, but it cannot hide her legs, wrapped in strips of dirty cloth. Each step she takes seems like pain itself. Very few people know that she once worked as a nurse in a community hospital, guiding patients through critical hours with steady hands and calm words. A simple back injury forced her onto prescription pills. What began as harmless pain relief eventually led her into the grip of something far more merciless. Now every morning she wakes up not asking how to live better, but whether she will survive the day. A few blocks away, children walk the same streets. They pass bodies lying motionless, uncertain if they are sleeping or dying. Their small shoes step carefully around syringes scattered on the pavement. Some of the children no longer look surprised. They walk through it the way other kids walk past playgrounds or bus stops. And that familiarity, that sense of this is normal, is what shakes the hearts of adults who pause long enough to notice. Near the train station, an elderly man bends close to the flames of a fire in an old metal drum. He once had a home with a white picket fence, a rose garden planted with his wife, Sunday barbecues with neighbors. But then came job loss, illness, and medical bills that swallowed everything. Debt piled up until there was nothing left but the memories. Tonight, the only warmth he has is from the fire and from the stories he keeps replaying in his mind. Kensington is filled with people like this. Their paths into despair are different. Injury, divorce, trauma, economic collapse, but their destination has been the same: poverty, addiction, and isolation. They still walk the streets, but they have become shadows that few truly see. At night, the firelight casts their silhouettes on cold brick walls. These are not just images of outsiders. They are reflections of a society allowing an entire part of itself to fade into darkness. The question that lingers: who will reach out to guide them back to the light? And maybe a question for you. When you hear these stories, do you think about the life they had before? What dreams might still be hiding under the ashes of addiction? And what responsibility do we carry as a society to simply watch or to act? The small battle. In a place where sidewalks are used to collapsed bodies, there are still footsteps that move with purpose, not hunting for the next high, but searching for a way to save lives. Every morning, Pastor Thomas pushes a small cart through the streets. Inside are loaves of bread, a few bottles of warm water, and spare clothing. He does not give sermons on sin. He does not point fingers. He simply hands each person a bag and quietly says, "Please take care of yourself today." Sometimes that is all a person needs: to feel seen, to feel remembered, to know they are not fully abandoned. Beside him walks Jake, a man who once lived beneath one of Kensington's bridges. Jake spent years in addiction before finally finding his way out. He comes back now not because he feels tempted, but because he believes that only someone who has walked through the same abyss can truly extend a hand to those who are falling. Together with his group, Soldiers for Recovery, Jake knocks on tents, searches alleys, and distributes Narcan, the small spray that can reverse an opioid overdose within seconds. They know the odds. They are not chasing miracles. Each week they might save 2 or 3 people, but in the same week, they lose others, familiar faces gone without goodbye. One morning, they may revive someone on the pavement. By the afternoon, that same person might collapse again. Victory in Kensington is fragile, as thin as the line between life and death. The city does show up, but the resources are far too small. Budgets for housing detox centers or treatment programs are a fraction of what is required. Plans are drafted, meetings are held, but bureaucracy stalls the process. Meanwhile, on the streets, people are falling every single day. For people like Pastor Thomas and Jake, they already know this fight is uneven. Most of their efforts will not change the outcome. Yet every morning, they lace up their shoes and step into the alleys. Because if one person opens their eyes after an overdose, if one trembling hand squeezes theirs in gratitude, if one soul makes it through the night, then the work is worth it. In a neighborhood drowning in despair, hope does not arrive as a brilliant light. It comes as a fragile matchstick. Their mission is simple: keep that flame alive. Now, let me ask you, if you were in their place, would you still keep showing up knowing that 9 times out of 10 your effort might fail? Would you keep fighting even when victory feels like sand slipping through your fingers? Specks of light in the night. When night falls over Kensington, many imagine only shadows and cold. But if you slow down, you notice something else, small. Specks of light, faint but steady, refusing to be extinguished. At one windy corner, a mobile coffee cart glows in yellow light. The man behind it was once homeless himself. Now he spends evenings pouring hot coffee, handing out slices of bread, and greeting faces he recognizes from his own past. He says, "The thing that saved me was not a program or a speech. It was a hand that reached out at the right time." His card is not just coffee, it is proof that kindness can turn survival into connection. A few blocks away, a team of young volunteers moves quietly with backpacks full of Narcan gloves and blankets. They do not live stream, they do not take pictures. They simply go tent to tent, asking softly, "Are you all right?" and leaving behind supplies that might mean survival. A former nurse in the group recalls nights when she revived someone only to see them minutes later, standing in line to buy again. Still, she returns every week. If they are breathing today, she says maybe tomorrow they will choose life. There are barbers who set up folding chairs on the sidewalk, giving free haircuts that turn into rare moments of dignity and laughter. There are local shop owners who, even as business dries up, still unlock their doors to let strangers shelter from the wind and rain. In the middle of decay, there are still gestures that refuse to let humanity die. None of these actions can change Kensington overnight. The sirens still echo, the overdoses continue, the cold still bites deep. Yet these specks of light prevent the darkness from claiming everything. They do not erase despair, but they remind us that despair is not the only story. Think about it. Have you ever had someone step into your life at the exact right moment? A teacher, a neighbor, even a stranger? If so, you know why these specks of light matter? Because in Kensington, sometimes one kind gesture is the difference between life and death. Kensington is not only a poor neighborhood, it is a warning written in bold letters across America's future. The American dream is more fragile than many want to admit. The hollow eyes and trembling hands are not confined to Philadelphia. If we remain indifferent, any city could become the next so-called zombie land. Illicit substances like fentanyl and tranq do not discriminate. They strike rich and poor alike. They do not wait for anyone to be ready. The most frightening part is not just death itself, it is when entire communities vanish from the map of hope, when we stop seeing them as neighbors, when society accepts that some people are simply gone. But we do not have to accept that. This is the moment to decide whether the light survives or whether darkness swallows more cities whole. If you believe these stories matter, if you want them to keep being told, please like and subscribe to Bear City 24. Because every view, every share, every voice added is one more reminder that these lives are not forgotten.